we had a crew come in. Oh, I moved this Wednesday night and didn't put it back. Oh well. So we had a crew come in this week. I think it was Thursday, and they did some decorating, and I love this. Don't you love this? It looks great. Apparently it's fall. What was the temperature yesterday? When Tennessee and Florida hit
90.
the field, I heard it was 92 degrees. Yeah. And I don't like football that much. So this morning we're going to ask a question and try and answer it. Why me? Have you ever dealt with people who go through some pretty traumatic sort of things, and they end up with why me? Now, as a minister, I have to tell you, it is high profile, and sometimes the job, it's not the person necessarily, but the job attracts some folks who, let's just call them EGR people. That's called extra grace required. And there's some people, do you know some people like that? There are some people that are just extra grace is required when you deal with them. So in Montana, we had this one gal at the church who, for some reason, really just was attracted to Suzanne, and would go to her, and I'd get kind of the overflow. Now keep in mind, when dealing with Kelly, she had this fence. Montana is got hills like here, so you have some properties that are kind of rolling, and you have to put in retaining walls and things like that. Well, her retaining wall was falling down, and she was looking for somebody to fix it for her. The problem was she wanted somebody to pay for it too. And now keep in mind, Kelly has some real issues, and so she doesn't think things quite through, and so it was, you would have to kind of go through things and spell out things to her just very slowly and very carefully. But in the back of your mind, you're screaming out, well, if you weren't smoking 4 packs of cigarettes a day, you can afford to fix the wall on your property. That's the extra grace required sort of people. Do you know those? She struggled with some other issues in her house. She is a hoarder, and I mean, this is classic hoarder. Literally, there were little paths through her house. And she didn't sleep in her bedroom because her bed was covered with stuff. She slept on the sofa, right? She slept on the, yeah. And of course, I have zero tolerance for cigarette smoke, and not that I'm intolerable or intolerant. I could be intolerable. I'm going to tell more stories about you as a child. So no, it's cigarette smoke. Those folks who smoke cigarettes, it's just, they're not bad folks. That's not the issue. I'm not intolerant of them. It's just when I walk into a home and it's a smoker's home and they smoke inside the home, it's just, it's pervasive. It's just, it reeks everywhere, that sort of thing. So she's not only a hoarder, but you would carry stuff out of her home to try and help her. And the stuff would be, if you sat in my office, it would start to make my office smell like cigarette smoke. You ever know anybody like that? Extra grace required. And so you just kind of look at these people, and they've got these problems in their life, and it's like, and she had relative problems too. Her relatives were, there's the one guy who's in prison in Montana for murder, who's related to her, and she's fearful of him when he gets out, that sort of thing. The challenge was, you just have to ask at some point, and I finally lost it, and I said, Kelly, why are you even contacting your family? You don't have the emotional resources to be able to handle this. Just stay away from your family. to just avoid them. And that's kind of hard for some people to do, but for Kelly, it's even harder. Some people ask this question, why me? And the rest of us are saying, why not? Right? But then there's other people that say, why me? And you are asking the same sort of question, why? How could this happen to such a good family? I mean, we had a family down in Florida that they were phenomenal folks. They made an effort of adopting special needs children. One of the first things we experienced with them was there were 2 daughters that they had adopted. He was an elder in our church, and they had adopted these girls, and they were AIDS babies. Their mom had AIDS. They were born with AIDS. And so one of the daughters at a very early age passed away. And we had the funeral. And poor John. John is probably the most non-emotive person I know. Engineer, by the way, works for Harris Corporation. Just stereotype. Any engineers in here? And just so I don't step on toes, but I will anyway. So non-emotive, and he's weeping at this funeral for this little 3.5-year-old little girl who died from AIDS complications. And he said something profound. He said, I did not realize how I could love someone who is not my flesh and blood so much. Which made you just wonder at this family who, they had FAS children, fetal alcohol syndrome. One little boy had to be on a leash in the backyard because with FAS, that little part of the brain that says, I ought not to do this, doesn't exist anymore. And he would run out in the street. So they had to kind of, and they just took these children in and just loved on them. And I mean, just phenomenal. But, sometimes things would happen in their own family and just wonder, here's this wonderful Christian family and they're experiencing this problem. Why? Why me? Is that hiccups? Am I hearing hiccups? Are you really? Somebody's scared. Oh, you tried. So let's go ahead and turn to Job. And just as a reminder, we're going to hit chapter 1, verse 1, just for a second, just to remind you of the background here. And then every few seconds, I'm just going to scream at Jessica and scare the hiccups out of her. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. So you get the picture of a very upright, godly man. Job chapter 1, verse 1. Now let's fast forward just a little bit, verse 13. And last week we just had the intro to him, told about his story, but today we're going to go into his story in more depth. Verse 13, if you remember, he had sons and daughters. They used to get together. Job was a very rich man. And so now here comes the calamity. I should also give you a little bit of background because something has happened behind the scenes. Job doesn't know about this. But here's this very upright man. And here's the background. Can you believe this? That God actually does this. God is bragging on Job. And so he's bragging on Job to, you remember who he's bragging to? Satan. Yeah, and apparently Satan does this. He's diddy-bopping around the world. He's just walking around, checking things out, checking people out. And so God's bragging, hey, have you seen my servant Job? Man, what a guy that is. So faithful. And Satan says, yeah, but he's only faithful. Why? Yeah, it's just, this is a small crowd, and I'm Mr. Relaxed. You guys get to answer along. So I'm going to put you on the spot. And yeah, and he says, well, you've just been so nice to the guy. His faith hasn't been tested. You need to let him be tested. So long story short, Job gets tested here. And isn't it interesting, we're talking about God actually allows something like this to happen. That's part of our dilemma. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And there came a messenger to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them. And the Sabaeans fell upon them and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. So part of his livestock is wiped out here. While he was still yet speaking, there came another and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. I don't know about you, but that's bad news. I mean, it's like one guy stops talking, the other guy comes, and we're talking about a pretty serious situation here, right? Verse 17. While he was yet speaking, oh, you mean the story's not over with yet? There came another, and he said, the Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. You know, I'm not sure. Maybe the guys that are really, you need to say, hey, will you buy me a lottery ticket, or these 3 servants that are the only ones that survive? Right? While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck down the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you. Well, this suddenly goes from, you know, so many coincidences. This is kind of a funny story. This is pretty serious. Have you ever had to do something like this? Terry, have you had to go out on a death notification? Yeah. We started something new in Lewistown just recently. We did not have a chaplain in Lewistown for the police, the fire department, or the sheriff's department. And so the sheriff came to me and asked, you know, can we get something started? And so we did. We started you know, just a little group, got some of the ministers together for some training. And it's Lewistown, you know, it's quiet, it's small, 6,000 people, 12,000 people in a county the size of Connecticut. You know, it's remote, it's small, and you kind of think there's not much that happens with 12,000 people. Well, he calls me up, and it's early one morning. He says, Rick, we've got a death notification. Can you go out with one of my deputies? And so he tells me what's happened. Well, actually, I get to the sheriff's department. We're all sitting there. Troy, he's bald. He's bald. He's got a beard. He rides a motorcycle. Do you have a motorcycle? No. So Troy is sitting there, and the deputy is with us, and the deputy is female. And the undersheriff is there as well. And we're talking about the situation. And it's a boy that I knew in the high school. 3 brothers. He's the oldest of the 3. Just, well, he's Tyler's age. Young fella, he was going to school up in Havre, which is a couple hours north. So almost up in Canada. And his girlfriend had broken up with him. And, well, that night he committed suicide. So it's the next morning. The family doesn't know. And so we go, the deputy and I, and she drives me out there, and I'm a little concerned about her. She's a young mom. And it's Lewistown, Montana. Everybody knows everybody. So we know this kid, we know his brothers. She knows the family, the father and mother better than I do. And so we knock on the door, and we pound on the door. And she's a nurse. But she's off that day. We know it's a small town. So we know her schedule is her car's in the garage. She's not at work. She has to be in the house, and nobody's answering the door. And so we go to get back to the vehicle, and we're getting ready to go out to where the dad works at the steel factory. And about this moment, she comes walking from the downstairs bedroom. She walks up, comes out the door, and sees us. Now, can you imagine what that's like? That, you know, here's the sheriff's car, and here's a deputy, and here's one of the preachers in town, and they're at your house, and they're knocking in the early morning hours. You kind of figure it out real quick, don't you? So we sat her down, and one of the things you do is you make sure there's nobody else in the house, because especially when it's a mom, and you tell them their little boy is just pulling his brains out. You know, they're screaming and they're yelling, and you don't do it like that, by the way. But they're screaming, and then here comes, you know, somebody else in the family, especially in Montana, carrying a gun, wondering why mom's screaming. She's the only one there. And we tell her baby is dead. So then we get a hold of her husband, and again, it's a small town. So we knew the number of the daughter and the owner of the plant that she worked at, and they called him out. And of course, don't tell him. So he's driving across town, wondering why nobody's telling him he's got to go home. And he pulls up, and there's a sheriff vehicle out there. Now, doesn't that make this story seem a whole lot more real? Job, your entire income has been wiped out. You don't have anything. One thing right after the other. The IRS is coming after you. Folks have stolen from you. Your animals are all gone. And then the really horrible happens. Not just one, but all your kids are dead. And by the way, you're faithful. Wouldn't you be asking, why me? God, what did I do? Does this suddenly seem like a real story to you? Why me? And I alone have escaped to tell you. Verses 20 and 21. Then Job arose, tore his robe, and shaved his head, and fell on the ground. And you get that? He worshiped. I want to know what kind of guy Job is. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. So we're going to fast forward here. The story's not over with. It gets worse. And you're thinking, for those of you who aren't familiar with the story, you're saying, how can you get worse than that? Well, remember, he shaved his head, he fell down, and he worshiped God. And in all this, he did not sin or charge God with wrong. Remember, there's almost like this bet between God and Satan. Satan doesn't like losing. And by the way, if anybody's going to play dirty, who's going to play dirty of the two? Satan or God? Satan. So he goes back and he says, oh yeah, God, right. Remember, you limited me. I could plague Job, but I couldn't plague him personally. You got to let me really make this guy hurt. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome sores, and from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took, Job, a piece of broken pottery with which to scrape himself while he sat in the ashes. Can you imagine having these oozing open sores, and you're living with this. And you're wondering, why me? Then his wife said, this gal, and we'll talk about her next week. Then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. Oh, thank you, honey. I really appreciate your support in this. You're such a loving, kind, wonderful woman. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Shall we receive good from God and shall not receive evil? How many of you can say that? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. So I have to ask you a couple questions. You know, here's the big question mark. Why me? You know, this just brings up all kinds of questions. And number one, how can God allow this? I mean, really. You know, remember the whole setting. Here's God and Satan, and they're dialoguing about that. And it starts out with a bragging about Job, and it descends into this almost like a bet between Satan and God. And it's all over the faithfulness of the man named Job. And then God allows this. I don't know about you. Does this bother you? I mean, it's bothered people from, you know, day one. For those who were here Wednesday night, Job is one of the books that almost didn't make it into the Bible because folks said, man, this one's pretty heavy. Do we really want this in the Bible? It made it in there. And remember, this debate was thousands of years ago. I mean, it was a long time ago. And it made it into the Bible because you see God all over the pages of Job. And you see him really in a positive light. Because this question does get answered. And we'll save it for the end of the sermon. So, here's some questions. Why do bad things happen to good people? Really, why? Wes and Susan Phillips. He's one of our elders. And I had the very great honor of ordaining him into the eldership at First Christian the last Sunday I preached. I've been after this guy for 11 years. He is perhaps the most godly man I've ever met in my life. Now, that doesn't mean he's without blemish. Believe me, Wes has a few problems. He's a Montana rancher. He's very independent. He's very strong-willed. And he's, you know, he can get angry. And he's apparently was a tough dad. But they raised 3 fine boys. He went to Abilene Christian University. For those who are Church of Christ that are in the room, you know that school. It's the liberal school, right? And which is okay, because all the people I know from ACU are some of the finest people I know. Well, not only did he go to ACU, but his wife Susan was a graduate of ACU. All 3 of his sons went to ACU, and 2 of the 3 daughter-in-laws were ACU graduates. It's a good school. And so here we have this Church of Christ family that's attending our church. This guy is about as godly as you can think of, just a great man. But when you look at Susan, you realize that years ago, before I got there 11 years ago, there's more to the story. And I don't see Wes cry much, but what I see brings him to tears is the story of how Susan got the burns on her body. Here's this family who is as faithful to God as you can. I've never seen anybody with this sort of testimony consistently. And Wes blames himself for this. They had a gas water heater. It was in the garage. He stored some flammables out in the garage. There was an explosion, a fire. Their house burned down. But Susan was burned over the majority of her body. And you see this beautiful, tall Texas woman, genteel, Southern belle. And you can see the scars. She doesn't hide them. You know, she wears open-toed shoes, and you can see the scars there. And you can just imagine poor Wes at some point is carrying her out of this burning house, weeping and crying, and then he didn't even think about his ranch, and they have a pretty nice ranch. He didn't even think about his house or his ranch because they went to the burn center, the Shriner Burn Center, took her there in North Dakota, and he just spent weeks and weeks and weeks just by her side, beating himself up about what had happened to her and blaming himself. But man, what a testimony for God this was. Through it all, he has remained and she has remained faithful to God. That's a Job sort of story, which helps you with why do bad things happen to some people. I told you, I'm going to give you this at the end. I'll give you the answer. Just hold on. So why do bad things happen? Why does God allow bad things to happen at all? Here's the no-brainer. If he rescued us from stupid, we basically wouldn't be able to do anything because we're pretty good at stupid. Do you know that? I hope I'm not shattering anybody's world, but stupid is pretty common when it comes to human beings. All you have to do is watch the presidential race and you see stupid. It's stupid on all sides. They're all stupid. Yeah, so why? We're the ones who brought it on. That's the simple question, which what is the good in God when there's still bad everywhere? Why? Well, why me? Why? Here, you know the St. Jude's Children's Hospital commercials? Have you caught those? Man, it tugs at your heart, doesn't it? There's something that happens that kind of bothers me, though, in the midst of all of this why me sort of thing. There's a line, and it's showing these children who are suffering from cancer, and man, your heart just grieves for these children. And it shows them, of course, with their hair gone because of the chemo and radiation they're going through. And you know, you just, and it talks about 1 out of 5 children diagnosed with cancer passes away. And of course, we at St. Jude's, we can change all that. Just give us money. Just give us money. And that's part of our problem, is the solution that we can fix anything at all. That's a myth. If you throw enough money at it, it's going to fix it. That's a myth. But they say something interesting. Did you catch it? No parent should ever hear that their child has cancer. Where do we get the sense of that? In whatever your view of the length of time that we're on this planet, in 10,000 years of human history, why do we still live with this myth that nobody should suffer? Death and dying and disease have been around since we fell out of the garden. Nothing has changed in 10,000 years, and it's not going to change, by the way, until Christ returns. So why do we live with this myth that somehow it can be better? I would say it points to the fact that, as one author said, God has put eternity in our hearts. We know deep down that things are supposed to be different. Our problem is we haven't added 2 and 2 and realized that the reason we're going through this is because we're sinners. And as sinners, we desperately need Jesus Christ. We just don't want to admit that we need something greater than ourselves. That's part of our problem. So here's the big why me. Well, part of it is the problem of evil, which I've kind of covered. Free will, we make choices. That's why God's not going to rescue you from your bad choices, the fall of man. You know, I've made all these references. But what about, everybody comes up with, yeah, what about my friend? What about your friend you mentioned, Wes and Susan? Why did they go through that? But what about God and Satan having this debate about the faith of Job? Well, I just want you to watch this video. Can you play that for us now?
Is it supposed to start on its own?
Should start automatically.
Is it supposed to be in this one?
It should be. Oh, well, keep on going.
Keep going?
Yeah, it's in there.
Not in the right
Or it
spot?
was. There it is.
Fast forwarded through your own
Technical
slides.
difficulties.
It's like fast forwarded through his own slides.
18 minutes. When I was born, I was stillborn baby. I was dead baby. I was blue baby. They put my body on a table in the corner and left me for dead. But it's not over until God say it's over. When I was 11 years old, my daddy got sick. 2 weeks later, my dad died with cancer of the liver. When I came along, I'm the baby of 8. And I'm not only the baby of 8. I'm a 8 on my mom, baby boy. I love my mama. My mama did everything for me. She fed me, she clothed me, she bathed me, she walked with me and held me. But one day in my life, my mom got sick when I was 14 years old. The doctor came to my family and said, your mama will never come home again. She had cancer. She had 6 months at the very moment to live. I said, no, my mama will never abandon me. My mama told me, I will never leave you. I will never abandon you. But I got down on my knees and prayed, God don't take mama, God don't take mama, God don't take mama. But in October 1968, my mama took her last breath. And when my mama died, I didn't want to live. I wanted to die too. I didn't have one thing to live for. Everywhere I went, people made fun of me. They look at me and they point and call me every name other than my own. He said, look, the boy walk funny, look, the boy talk funny. I went home every day and got in bed and chills rolling down my face, begging to die. I attempted suicide every